friends, it's Dr. Dickinson. In this video, I am going to be explaining what the Rica is. So if you are a multiple subject teacher candidate, an education specialist, you're required from the state of California to pass the Rica. The Rica is the Reading Instruction Competency Assessment. And basically, it's the science of reading, how to teach reading, how to assess reading, how to deliver reading instruction. And guess what? I passed the Rica. So in the video, I'm going to be showing you best practices for studying for the assessment, what to expect when you're taking the assessment, and how to manage your time for this test. If you stay in and stay on the video, I'll even share with you a quizzes that I created so that you can practice the multiple choice and constructive response questions for the Rica. And guess what? The Rica is now free. That's right. If you go onto the CTC website, I will show you on my video, you can now register to take the Rica and not have to pay any fees. So now's the time. Seize the day and take the Rica. I will support you and get you through it, and we'll do this together. Hey everybody, let's get started with talking about the Rica. The Rica is a reading instruction competency assessment for the state of California. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Dr. Dickinson, and thanks for studying with me. Friends, the purpose of the Rica is to ensure that all of California trained candidates for the multiple subject teaching credentials and the education specialist instruction credential have the knowledge and skills to provide effective reading instruction for all of our students. This is based on California Education Code and the multiple subject teaching credential, as well as the initial education specialist instructional credential for preliminary level 1 or clear level 2. The Rica consists of 5 domains. You are going to be required to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding and expertise in each of these 5 domains. I'll be providing an overview of each of those domains, as well as the 15 competencies in each of these domains. I'll also share which domain addresses each of the 3 subtests. When you're taking the Rica, you will want to know where you need to grow. So it's important to take a pre-assessment or a diagnostic to determine where you need the most support. On your Rica assessment, as you can see here, Domain 2 word analysis is 33% of the Rica exam. Domain 2 and Domain 3 are going to be addressed in Subtest 1. That is why it is considered one of the most challenging subtests for the Rica exam. Domain 1, Planning, Organizing, and Managing Reading Instruction, is part of Subtest 3 and includes a case study. Domains 4 and 5 you will find in Subtest 2. You will have 2 assessment options for taking the Rica. The first is the Rica written exam. This is typically how most people take the Rica. This is what I did when I took the Rica. And the Rica written exam consists of 3 subtests. There is also an option for a Rica video performance assessment in which you will videotape yourselves with whole group, small group, and individual students. You will also need to demonstrate your expertise in each of the domains and competencies. If you pass the Rica, you don't get a score, but you get a pass. And it can be used to apply for your California certification within 5 years of the test date. Going back to the video, again, you have to demonstrate yourself teaching with the whole, small, and individual groups. It is recommended that you do the video only if you're working with students and you have experience teaching. When you're taking the Rica written test, Here are some strategies for the multiple choice. You're going to see that there are multiple choice questions in each of the subtests. First, you'll want to scan the question. Read the question off in the last sentence first. Identify the key terms of what is wanted, and then read each of the answers, the responses. Identify the two responses that do not relate to the key terms, and select the correct response. If the correct response is evident, then just move on. Don't overanalyze. Your first guess is probably right. We're going to go ahead and try this strategy with some sample questions. These questions were provided by the Rica sample test on the CTC website. You can always go to CTC exams to register for the Rica. As of July 2022, the Rica test and all other California state tests fees are going to be waived. So I would strongly recommend registering as soon as you can. So let's get started with some test prep. Here's a sample question. A kindergarten teacher plays the following game with students. The teacher says, "Guess whose name I'm going to say now?" The teacher then says the initial sound of a student's name. And the children try to guess the name. This activity is likely to promote the reading development of students primarily by helping them. Again, in the last sentence, we're looking for a reading activity. So, which of our four options show us a reading activity? Is it blending separate sounds in words? Yeah, that's a reading activity. Is it recognizing a spoken word is made up of sounds? Sure, that's a reading activity too. Is it understand the principles of phonics? Not really, that's not a reading activity. Or learning how to spell their own names. Again, not a reading activity. So we're left with option 1 and 2. Going back to think about what the teacher's doing, the teacher is sounding out the student's first initial sound of a name. So they're not blending separate sounds in words. They're recognizing that a spoken word is made up of sounds. So the answer is 2. Let's try another question. During which of the following strategies of spelling development do students typically begin to show an understanding of the correspondence between letters and sounds? So here we're looking for an activity, stages, in which the students are showing an understanding between a letter and a sound. Well, I know that conventional spelling is learning about writing conventions. So that's not an option. Transitional spelling is when students are transitioning different sounds and spelling patterns. Again, not an option. Phonetic spelling is when students are sounding out sounds phonetically. And semi-phonetic is when students are making the connection between letters and sounds. So the answer is B, semi-phonetic. The 4 steps of reciprocal teaching are, so we're looking for a teaching strategy that demonstrates students' reciprocal teaching. They're teaching their colleagues and they're collaborating. So what are the 4 options? We have survey questions, read and review. That sounds more like an activity and not really something that students are doing reciprocally with each other. So I'm going to avoid that one. Is it preview, paraphrase, ponder, and perform? Preview and paraphrase are definitely associated with a reading activity and students are summarizing. But it doesn't really give me the impression that students are becoming the teacher in small group reading sessions. They're not modeling or helping their peers guide group discussions. So I'm going to say no. Then we have question, clarification, predict, and summarize. That definitely sounds like strategies that teachers use in reading, Well, let's check out the last one. See it, say it, cover it, whisper it. It's definitely something teachers do when they're learning a new word for spelling, but not for reciprocal teaching. So the answer is C. Function words such as to, the, and, of, are most appropriately taught in the context of which of the following areas of reading instruction? All right. Well, even if you don't know what a function word is, you may be able to eliminate some of the other choices here. I know the words to, the, and, of, and are not phonetically spelled words, so I can avoid A. And they are not words that promote academic language development, so that can also be omitted. Now I have structural analysis skills and sight word vocabulary. I know that sight words are words that students need to know with automaticity by looking at their sight. Definitely to and that are some of the most common words in the English language in writing. So I'm going to go with D, sight words. And that is correct, sight word vocabulary. So you can see here that just by thinking aloud the questions, by eliminating and just knowing what a good association might be, we can select the correct answer. So when it comes to learning about Rica academic language, Rica skills, and doing well on the assessment, we definitely need to know the research of reading. We need to know teaching strategies, academic language of the test, like we just saw in our multiple choice, supports for students, like students with exceptionalities, advanced learners, and English language learners. We also need to know how to assess and use assessment to make informed decisions about instruction. All right. So let's talk about the 3 subtests and what is being assessed. In Rica Subtest 1, again, it is the most challenging of all 3 subtests. It includes domain 2 and 3, which is word analysis and fluency. There are 7 competencies in these 2 domains. And in Subtest 1, you will have approximately 35 multiple choice questions. 77% of those questions will be in domain 2, word analysis, and 23% in domain 3, fluency. You also have 2 constructive response questions. Domain 2, word analysis, is 150 to 300 words. In domain 3, fluency, is 75 to 125 words. Again, the passing score for each Rica subtest is 220. So we can see this different competencies that are being addressed on Rica Subtest 1 and what we'll need to study. Now, there are a lot of great books for studying for the Rica that will allow you to unpack each of these competency. I recommend the Rica Ready for Rica book, and that is a test preparation guide for California's Rica assessment by James Zerillo. This is available on Amazon. In Zerillo's book, you will see how he unpacks each of these competencies with both understanding the academic language of each of the key terminologies as well as classroom examples. For example, if we're working with Rica Subtest 1, we need to know word analysis. We'll have to know some of the key academic language like a phoneme, which is the smallest unit of sound. Now, I included a visual here because I'm a visual learner. As you can see, the phonemes in this example are the sounds, how the sounds are spelled phonetically. And the graphemes represent the written representation, how these sounds are actually spelled. Our students also need to have phonological awareness, which is the ability to hear, identify, and manipulate sounds. So they'll do activities that allow them to segment sounds, blend sound, omit sounds, and manipulate sounds. We also want our students to have other skills like rhyming, syllabication, and we want our students to be able to take part of different activities that include phonemic awareness, such as manipulating individual sounds and hearing individual sounds. And some of these sounds may be challenging, like diphthongs, such as the word this, where the TNH make its own unique sound. Now, let's talk about phonological awareness. This is an important progression to be aware of because it allows us to think about how reading develops and how students develop phonological awareness. Think about it. When you started reading, you probably started learning and hearing books like Dr. Seuss, Cat in the Hat. So, beginning reading often starts with rhyme discrimination. Do cat and hat rhyme? How about dog and log? Ran and man? So, once students are able to discriminate rhymes, then we want them to be able to produce rhymes. What is a word that rhymes with mom? Students should also be able to blend different sounds. And so, what words do these syllables make? Pancake, pancake. And students should also have phoneme blending. What words do these sounds make? Cr, st, crust. And if you change the sound, what's the new word? If I change hat to start with the sound, mat. So students are manipulating phonemes. Here is a group of phonemic awareness activities that you can start to explore either in your classroom or with a friend. It's important for us to really practice these phonemic awareness activities and skills so that we can apply these skills and do well on the Rica. I'm sure you're like me. You need to practice in order to really apply the skills and really be able to distinguish skills. Think about it in terms of Bloom's taxonomy. There's so much understanding and knowledge on this assessment. In fact, the Rica has over 200 technical terms. Therefore, it's important for us to practice. And practicing phonemic awareness activities are really important. Remember, this is the domain that it has the largest weight on the Rica exam. So it's important to really understand the content and be able to apply it. You're going to click on this link and you'll have access to a bunch of phonemic awareness activities that you can use. It also tells you what the activities are and how they may confuse students. Again, great things to practice so that you can distinguish between blending, categorization, segmentation, addition and deletion, omission, and things like that. All right, let's talk about Rica Subtest 2. In Subtest 1, we got to see the foundations of reading and what students need in terms of essential skills in order to begin to read. Now, in Subtest 2, we're going to have questions that deal with vocabulary, academic language, background knowledge, and reading comprehension. You'll have a total of 1 hour and 15 minutes to work on Subtest 2. Again, you'll have multiple choice questions as well as essays. There are 2 constructed response questions that you will need to address in Subtest 2. Here are the competencies that are identified in Rica Subtest 2. Comprehension, vocabulary, okay? And notice that you'll have to look at vocabulary in terms of ways to teach, the role in reading development, as well as instruction and assessment. And for comprehension, You'll need to differentiate between narrative text, information text, and know the research in terms of instruction and assessment for reading comprehension. Now, there's so much academic language on the Rica. We want to know that academic language is critical for student success, especially when it comes to reading. It is the language of schools and language of the workplace. So you will learn explicit strategies that you can use in your classroom to teach academic language. This is especially important for our second language learners. Here's a wonderful model that can help you understand all of the elements that support academic language and literacy. We've already talked about some of the foundational skills like phonemic awareness and phonics, and how that builds towards fluency, which is the student's ability to read words fluently. If students do not have fluency, they will not be able to comprehend what they're reading. Once students have developed fluency, then we can start explicitly teaching comprehension strategies. We always want to teach our comprehension strategies in conjunction with oral language, written language. And we'll also build in grammar, so that will help students with spelling, sentence structure, and understanding unfamiliar words. Students will also learn about prosody, which is the intonation and how language is expressed and how that ties into meaning. As educators, we always want to build on our background schemas of our learners and emphasize native language transfer to support all students in having academic language and literacy. If you click on the link here, you'll get access some additional resources and research on academic language. I encourage you to check it out. I also wanted to talk about the SIOP framework, which is the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. This is a critical piece of supporting English language learners. It's a scientifically validated model for supporting English learners through sheltered instruction. It includes reading intervention, RTI, ESL techniques, differentiated instruction, and connecting it to our state standards. A critical piece of success on the Rica and working with their kiddos is really knowing and understanding your Common Core state standards for reading. As you start to explore the state standards, you will see how all of the skills that I'm talking about are explicitly addressed in the state standards. I also encourage you to start looking at your ELD frameworks so that you can see best practices for supporting English language learners in your state frameworks as well. Feel free to click on this link here and you will get access to a Padlet of resources for supporting English language learners in their ELD development. Now, I just want to piggyback that word recognition and language comprehension are intertwined. We know that those critical early reading skills are what help our students to be able to recognize words and have fluency. And now we're going to build on that strand by bridging language structures, vocabulary, background knowledge, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. One of my favorite things to read is from What Works Clearinghouse. I've included a hyperlink here to a ton of resources that are research-based and high leverage practices that you can use. There's also articles on supporting second language learners, students with learning disabilities, and foundations of reading. When it comes to reading comprehension, the foundational skills are coupled with language comprehension and strategic knowledge. When students have that automatic word recognition, we can start explicitly teaching some strategies that will support them in comprehension. Of course, As you can see, print concepts are built into our foundational skills as well. So students are learning comprehension in tandem with reading. One of the best ways to get students excited about reading when they're just learning how to read is by doing lots of read alouds and exposing our students to a variety of reading materials. Here are some explicit reading comprehension strategies that you can use in your classroom. These are great ways to help your students develop the habits of mind to be a good reader. When you start looking at some of the questions, both here on your essays and your case studies, you may have be able to identify students who have struggles with reading comprehension. So these are great strategies to be aware of so that you can address this in your case studies. Now let's talk about our essay. You will have one focused educational problem on the subtest and one instructional task. Please make sure that you read each essay prompt carefully and think about how you will organize your response. Be sure you apply content and pedagogical content knowledge with examples. So again, your pedagogical content knowledge is your research-based practices. Why are these strategies that I'm intentionally selecting to support my students aligned with best practices for research, and how will they allow them to access the content? Okay, we're going to talk about Rica Subtest 3 now. This is really all about Domain 1, which is planning, organizing, and managing reading instruction based on ongoing assessment. On Subtest 3, you're going to have 25 multiple choice questions. Again, there are 2 competencies. Competency 1, planning, organizing, and managing reading instruction. And competency 2, reading assessment. This is also where you're going to have your case study. This is the 300 to 600 word response assessing both of these domains. It is recommended that you take Subtest 3 at the end because Subtest 3 includes all of the domains and all of the competencies. So we really want to make sure that we know all of the strategies and feel confident talking about each of those domains. Here's an example of one of the reading assessments that you should be familiar with. It is the Yop Singer. The Yop Singer is designed to support you in understanding where your students are in their reading development progression. It will help you identify if your students have phonemic awareness, segmentation, and blending skills. Feel free to watch this video as this teacher administers the Yop Singer to a young second grade student. All right. So after you watch the video, think critically about what are the key components of a structure of successful instruction. Remember, Subtest 3 is all about designing, planning, and using reading assessments. So in order for us to really design successful instruction, we need to be able to focus on the lesson. What is it that we're trying to teach? What is it that we're explicitly modeling and demonstrating so that our students can understand the skills and strategies that we are teaching? So with the focus lesson, you're modeling, you're doing it. And then you move into guided instruction where you work with your students and do it together. Your students can then work collaboratively in a small group and then independently. So as you can see, the students are moving towards individual, independent progression of being able to work on their own. So how do you plan reading instruction? Reading centers are a popular choice for early elementary teachers where students work at different centers and practice different skills that they're working on. For example, one center might have students doing segmentation activities, where another center might have students working on spelling skills. A third center could have students practicing their fluency, and a fourth center could be working in a small group with the teacher. So once you've identified your skills, you also want to know about assessments that you could administer to see where students are in their progression. F&P, Fontes and Pinnell, is a popular assessment that is often given throughout elementary. This particular assessment allows you to identify where your students are in their reading fluency. Students are given a score that will allow you to see where they are in their reading levels. Based on their identified reading level, you will then be able to select a book that is just above their level of ability so that the students are continuously progressing in their reading development. Again, we want to make sure that we're having our students read consistently and reading independently, as well as doing guided reading with their teacher. Silent sustained reading is a popular activity in elementary schools. However, if our students are not reading independently, they don't have fluency, SSR really is not a useful practice to have daily. SSR is better when students are able to read on their own. Until then, we can do things like having our students work on their high frequency words, work on their phonemic awareness and blending activities, and working on reading decodable books which have consonant vowel consonant words that are easily decodable and include pictures for helping students get a context of what they're reading as a cue to support them in decoding and blending. Reader's Workshop is also a popular activity and approach to designing reading instruction. Here's an example. This comes from Lucy Calkins. And this particular workshop component, the teacher begins with the mini lesson, and then students are working independently for reading and writing and conferring in small groups. The teacher will often lead a small group mid-workshop teaching practice to extend the mini lesson and remind students of ongoing habits. And then there's a brief share out where the students and the teacher meet and they talk about what they did and celebrate their achievements. I also want to direct you to one of my favorite sites. This is from Reading Rockets. Reading Rockets has a ton of wonderful resources for you to consider in research-based practices. This particular article is called The 12 Components of Research-Based Reading Programs, and I encourage you to read it to really have a good understanding of what are critical components of reading programs. Now, if you are already in the classroom, I would advise that you look at your reading materials that are state adopted and read the front matter. Your schools are required to purchase research-based programs for reading instruction. And so they should include a balanced approach, which include phonemic awareness, decoding, whole world language, and reading activities to support diverse learners. As you can see here, in this particular screenshot, we have running records, which are important for fluency, comprehension, to support our students in developing comprehension strategies and understanding what they're reading, and progress monitoring. We want to be consistently collecting data with our kiddos so that we can monitor their progress and determine when and if interventions are needed throughout our reading program. All right, So I've included a note-taking guide for you to use as you go through each of the subtests. One important thing to consider is defining the key terminologies in each of the competency areas. Considering how would you teach it? How would you assess it? Include at least one instructional activity and one way to assess. And then again, in each of your competencies, always be mindful of how you would support struggling readers, English learners, and advanced learners. You can always include hyperlinks to resources and activities to further your understanding when you're creating a study guide. In addition, I love the What Works Clearinghouse practice guides that are research-based articles published by the U.S. Department of Education. I strongly encourage you to check out each of their articles. They include articles on the foundations of reading, reading comprehension, supporting diverse learners, and engaging and motivating students with reading when they are struggling. So some great articles here, and unfortunately I can't share it. Reading Rockets, let's see if it popped up. Nope. There we go. So you can see all the recommendations here as well as examples. And again, the key terminology that you see in these articles are what will appear on the Rica. You need to be able to know with automaticity, just like our kiddos, what is a consonant blend or digraph, and what is phonemic awareness. So these are great ways to identify in the context of a reading instruction program the academic language that you will see on the Rica. Reading Rockets, which I already shared, and another one of my favorite sites is Coloring Colorado, which is all about supporting English language learners. You can do any type of search here on how to best support English language learners. Tons of strategies and research-based articles. Here's a great one. Many of the ELLs in my class are able to decode text, but continue to struggle with reading comprehension. This sounds like a reading question, a Rica assessment question for sure. So definitely check out the articles here. Okay, so when it comes to the constructed response, let's talk about how you'll be evaluated. This is on a 3-point scale. In order to get a 3, you need to fulfill the purpose of the assignment. That's why it's so important to read the question carefully and respond to what it's being asked. You need to also accurately and effectively demonstrate content and pedagogical knowledge. So you need to be able to identify the content. Is it reading instruction? Is it fluency? And then you'll be able to identify pedagogical knowledge. What are the best practices for that identified content area that is being asked on this instructional task? Okay. And again, you'll want to connect it to supporting examples, evidence, and rationales based on the situation and based on the research in these areas. So let's just take a look. I did include 4 sample constructed responses that were provided on the Rica website. But here's one example. Again, you just have to provide a brief response, no more than 300 words. Use the information below to complete the exercise that follows. A second grade teacher frequently uses the following strategy with struggling readers who are performing below the second grade fluency benchmark. The teacher selects a variety of supplemental texts that use a controlled vocabulary. Example, nearly all the words are high-frequency sight words or easily decodable words. Then the teacher has the student read these texts aloud quietly to themselves over a period of days as the teacher monitors their reading. Using your knowledge of reading fluency, write a response in which you identify what aspects of fluency, accuracy, reading rate, or prosody, this instructional strategy primarily develops. And explain how this instructional strategy promotes development of the aspect you identified. Be sure to relate your response to specific features of the instructional strategy described above. So again, you're identifying the instructional strategy in the task, you're explaining how it promotes development, and you also identify what aspects of fluency is being addressed in this instructional strategy. Okay? So let's look at the sample response that's provided. Again, these are all available on the Rica website. This instructional strategy primarily helps develop students' reading rate. The selected tasks help support development of reading rate because they use controlled vocabulary, i.e., primarily easily decodable words and high-frequency words. Notice that this particular response is pretty much restating what was given in the question so far. Now we're adding in the research. Research shows that reading text with a high readability is more effective in enhancing reading rate than when readability is not controlled. The strategy also promotes reading rate because the teacher selects a variety of these texts and has the student read them over a period of days. This provides the students with repeated practice reading the same words in a variety of contexts, which helps build their automatic recognition of the words, i.e., fluency. Automaticity in word recognition is essential for developing reading rate, which enhances fluency. So as you can see here, again, they're using the academic language, they're connecting it to the research, they're providing a rationale and why it is effective and why it connects to that identified domain of fluency. Now, if we read the evaluation, you can see here they're connecting it to domain 3, connecting it to fluency, and the accurate understanding of fluency. So again, we want to know the research, we want to know the domains, and we want to know the competencies. And again, we want to know the academic language, those key terms on the Rica. Over 200 technical terms on the Rica. I've included in this presentation some links to some Quizlets online that you can use so that you can develop fluency with the academic language of the Rica assessment. A critical piece in being in multiple choice as well as constructed response. Feel free to go through the rest of these responses after you reviewed the constructed responses that are hyperlinked on this presentation, as well as the evaluation. Again, when it comes to multiple choice, record your key instructional strategies and key terms as you go through this section. So a few things that you may do is you might want to just start when you're taking the test. Start by reading the constructed response. And then as you go through the multiple choice, you can identify the key terms. So you can start creating an outline on your assessment while you're taking the multiple choice. And that way, when you get to that constructed response, you'll have all of the academic language front loaded for you to answer those essays and to answer those constructed responses. Okay? So let's study. I have included vocabulary flashcards and quizzes for you to practice. Practice is what is a critical piece of passing the Rica. It's really important for you to synthesize the information, which is why I've created a template for you to write notes as a study guide. And of course, it's important to find a study buddy. For the case study, you will have one essay. This essay will include all of those 5 domains. That's why it's Subtest 3 and you should take it at the end. This requires a written response of approximately 300 to 600 words. You are going to get some substantial background knowledge on a student and samples on their performance. You'll be asked to assess, analyze, and then recommend appropriate instructional strategies and tell us why would they be effective. A few strategies, well, actually, there's a lot for this case study. Again, we want to make sure that we're reading the prompt, make notes, highlight what you should be including. If it helps you to make an outline while you're reading the question and responding to the prompt, I would definitely do that. Again, identify key pieces in the attached assessment data. Make some notes. Be sure that you're accepting what you're reading, okay? Don't make a judgment or assume. Don't try to fill in missing information. That's not what they're asking for you to do here. They want you to, given the information, come up with the plan. So you'll be describing 2 different strategies that would be most effective in providing a rationale. Another important note here is you do not want to bullet. You want to write in paragraphs. You can underline your need and develop a strategy, and then underline your second need. So here's an example of a case study. This is a case study that focuses on a student named Isabel, who's 8 years old. Her primary language is English. You're going to get some documents. You'll have to read it. She's in the 3rd grade. And then here it says, your response should include the following. Okay? 3 parts. 1, identify the reading strengths and or needs at this point in the school year, citing evidence from the documents to support your observations. So going back to the evidence, back to the documents, and support it. Support your beliefs about what would be important strengths, okay? And then describe 2 instructional strategies or activities. Again, connecting this back to the assessment data, that's your rationale. And then explain how each strategy activity you describe would promote Isabel's reading proficiency. All right. So as you can see, this is the first piece of evidence that's provided, and it's a reading inventory. It's asking the student about their interests, their likes about reading, if they think they're a good reader. And so this is important to consider because it will help you make a plan for how to best support the student, whether on their interests and what they like about reading. And the second piece of evidence that they provide, this is an excerpt from an informal assessment of Isabel's reading performance. As you can see from this assessment, she's reading aloud and the teacher is making annotations based on her reading ability. So she deleted the word little. There's pauses here in between certain words. These words may be words that she is not familiar with. So they're unfamiliar words. They're not, they may or may not be necessarily words that she's had some prior experiences with. And certainly the teacher can use segmentation to support the student in being able to read the word. Finally, you'll get another piece of evidence. This is from a transcript about what Isabel has read. So checking in for oral reading comprehension. And as you can see here, why do Sarah's eyes filled with tears? She's asking her to make an inference. And she says, because she's tired. My mom says she can tell when my brother's really tired because he starts to cry. So she's building on her prior experiences and connecting it to the text, which is a really great reading comprehension skill. And then we have this particular teacher log here. And this is giving us evidence of Isabel's reading activities. You want to look for what the teacher is making note of. She's fidgeting, she's playing with her hair, so she's not really engaged with reading here. Now we see her accuracy is 97%, rate is 70 words per minute, less than 10 words below the fall 50th percentile benchmark. She didn't make many errors, but she slowed down to decode several high-frequency irregular words, which is what we noticed on the reading fluency assessment. And she was slowing down with those irregular words. And then we have some more notes about a conference with Isabel's parents. And finally, a last note on her choice for independent reading books and her progress. All right. And then in this next section here, we have a class log, and students are doing a journal about their book. And then following her reading log, the teacher has a dialogue between herself and Isabel about her reading log entry. So it's really important here to read this information, take a look at your writing, make some inferences, again, connecting it back to evidence and strategies. So we have a sample response here. You can make a copy. You can bold some words that you want to make note of. Okay, some key academic language, assessment strategies, and next steps. Notice that in this particular response, she's making note of assessment. So that's an important piece of this subtest 3. You want to know your reading assessments. So there's informal reading assessment as well as the oral reading fluency. Also making note of her performance on each of these assessments. And then identifying some of the areas where she struggled. Again, those high frequency, irregular words and low frequency words. Okay, and then identifying areas for growth. So, as noted here, a lack of understanding, inferential comprehension, good literal recall, and some strategies for improvement, increasing her vocabulary and understanding of multi-meaning words, an instructional strategy here to improve comprehension, teaching her to use information from the text to better understand character motives. As you can take note of, again, we're writing from the lens of if you were the teacher, what you would do. All right. And then we have our second strategy would be to help Isabel increase her understanding of vocabulary, first focusing on words with multiple meanings. Okay. So a good strategy is to look for the academic language, underline the instructional strategies, and bold assessment strategies. Again, when we look at our rubric for the case study, it is a 4-point scale. A 4 means the response completely fulfills the purpose of the assignment, demonstrating accurate and effective application of the relevant content and pedagogical knowledge, and providing strong supporting evidence and examples and rationales based on the Rica domains, always connecting it back to those Rica domains. Here's the evaluation of the sample response. Make note of the evaluator's identification of what was effective, discussing those 2 strategies that should enhance her literacy development, interpreting the performance, strengths, as well as areas for growth, and then connecting it to supporting evidence found in the samples provided. All right. So again, I recommend using the Ready for Rica book by James Derulo. It includes all of the competencies and domains as well as test taking tips and strategies. I've included links to your flashcards and vocabulary words. You can also color code by chapter so that you can see which chapter aligns with which Rica subtest. You'll also find in the Zorilla book questions in the chapter summary. These are great points of reference to really understand each of the competencies. Include that in your study guide. Print out your study guide. Read your study guide. Use your study guide when you're explaining to your students about each of the reading and writing and spelling activities you are using in your classroom. Okay, remember you must earn a passing score on either the written Rica examination or video performance. Bonus, there's no limit to the number of times you can take the Rica, and as I shared earlier, you can now register for the Rica without any fees. You will need to have a passing score of 220. If you pass, you won't get a score, you'll just get pass. And every paper is scored by 2 readers randomly selected. You can always check out the website for more information on scoring, rubrics, as well as assessments that you can practice. Remember to always focus on your standards, instruction that is assessment-driven, research-based, systematic, sequential, and explicit. Instruction and application in classroom, as well as differentiation for a full range of learners. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram at TeacherPrepTech. And have a wonderful holiday season.